Carolyn Dube here. What's the play for today? Well, thanks to the goodies that 10 Second Studio sent me with their VerDay paints, I am going to turn paper into rust. And to do that, well, it's just a few simple steps, but along the way, something very strange happened to me. I had an almost oops. Not an oops, but an almost oops. I was sure we were heading down the path of the oops, and then no, it wasn't. So I think this is the first time this has ever happened to me. Also too, at the end of the video where I turn this into a card, where I actually attach it to a blank card front, or cardstock, you know, the folded thing, card blank. There's what I'm looking for, card blank. One of the things for me is getting things to line up. And I have a hard time lining up one side, let alone four sides of anything. So I'm going to show you my cheat for how I put what I've made onto the front of the card so that it always lines up every single time for me, or at least that's how it looks by the end. Well, anyway, enough of my talking. Come take a look. Well, here's what came in the kit. I've got 4 different kinds of paint as well as the patina finish there. I'm going to pick just 2 of these to work with. I'm going to work with iron and with brass. The paper that I'm using, it's fancy paper. It's office store cardstock, 110-pound weight, nothing fancy at all. I'm going to put some brass paint on there and then just spread it around with a paintbrush. And I'm going to spread this paint upon this cardstock in the most perfect way, using the finest techniques. Yet, no, I'm just smearing it around with a paintbrush, and I'm kind of smoothing it out because I put plenty on there and I don't want to waste any of it. So I'm just going to kind of smooth it out as best I can. The brass was very easy flowing kind of paint. I'm going to repeat this same process with the iron paint. When I've got the page all filled, I'm going to set this aside and let it completely dry before I go on to the next step. It took, I don't know, an hour. Yeah, I'm really bad at reading a clock and remembering what the little numbers said, so just go until it's dry. When it's dry, then you're ready to go to the next step. Well, here's what the 2 look like completely dry. I'm going to experiment and play around with different stencils on these because this is my first time using the VerDay paint, so I want to see what they can do. I'm taking my verbiage stencil and I am just now taking the same iron paint and a cosmetic sponge, and I'm doing a very wet and sloppy job of stenciling here. And the good news is I don't have to wait for this layer to dry before I can put the patina on it. It actually needs to be wet before I do that. So that's part of why I am hustling to get this thing stenciled on there with lots and lots of paint, as I want it to stay nice and juicy when I hit it with that patina. Of course, this is my first time doing it, and I am making an assumption when they say wet paint that it needs to be super juicy wet paint. So we'll see if it really has to be that wet to see what the results are. So I've just about got this stenciled on here, and I'm going to lift up that stencil once I get those last little bits on there. And there's some areas that I can tell where I have more wet paint than others. Up in the upper right-hand corner, that doesn't have as much wet paint on it as, say, down at the bottom and in the middle. Well, we're going to see what happens. I've got the patina spray here, and I am putting on a very generous amount of it. I am not being shy with this stuff. And with the iron, yet nothing happens instantly. It takes it a few minutes before you get to see the changes. So while I'm waiting for that to do something, I'm going to put some pattern on the other paper. I'm bringing in my Circles Layer Me stencil, and I'm just using one of the patterns on there. Same wet, gushy kind of stenciling. And I'm going to do the other half of the paper with my Squares Layer Me stencil. Now, they do recommend that you wear gloves when doing this. So yet another example for you of do what I say, not what I do. So while the paint's nice and wet, I am going to hit it with a generous amount of that patina spray so that the chemical reaction or whatever magic happens with this can begin. Now, it is going to take a little while for it to happen, so magically, thanks to technology, here's what they look like the next day. Took the iron a little bit longer to react. Now, not only do these things look awesome, but they also have an incredible texture and feel to them, really like rust. But it also had a little bit of residue on it, like if you touched real rust. And so I wanted to seal them somehow. So I grabbed one of my matte glues, and this one's PPA, and the matte, and I am just sort of squeegeeing it on there to get a thin coverage of some kind of glue or sealer. Anything that you've got, give it a try and see if you like how it seals it, or maybe you don't even have to seal it. Now, I picked up a little bit of the residue in that glue so you can see a little hint of the blue, and that's why I wiped it off before I went over to my next one. And on this one, it was almost an oops. So I've put the PPA on there just like I did the last one, and when I squeegee it around, I lose the entire look of rust on this, and it just becomes one brown paper. All of the wonderful texture and look and rich colors, yeah, they just disappeared. I'm like, oh, this is an oops. This was so not what I planned. But there's got to be an opportunity in it somewhere, right? Well, it turned out this was an opportunity for me to be patient. Even though it looks like it's all gone, when it is completely dry, it comes back. Well, I think I've fallen in love with the rust one, so I'm going to use that to make a card. I cut out a portion of it to the size of the front of the card, and it's awesome as it is, I want to add a little something to it. So I'm going to make a little wire embellishment. Disclaimer here, I am by no means a wire artisan. I just figure, hey, I can do this. I'm an art adventurer. I'll try stuff that I'm not really that good at and see what happens. I want to make a little heart shape. So I figure, hey, I'm just going to bend this around a little bit. I'm using some wire that's easily bent with my hands, and I have no idea what gauge it is because it's not written on the wire itself. So yeah, I don't know what kind it is. But it looks coppery and it's easily bent with my hands. So I'm grabbing some pliers, and I don't know the names of those pliers. They're ones that I've purchased, and frankly, it's just what I have. I don't know if they're the perfect tools to do this, but they're what I have on hand, so I'm gonna make them work. Okay, so I've got the heart here. I've zoomed in, and I have the problem of how am I gonna keep the heart closed and still look nice and attach the card without having to put a whole bunch of stuff on it. So my answer was to flip that end around, make kind of like a hook there so it holds that other piece of wire, the longer piece. And then because it's unsightly, I am going to then flatten it, and I'm going to do it right off camera, just slightly off camera. So it's like if I was like 2 inches higher, you'd actually see what was going on. Well, maybe you shouldn't see anyway, because apparently it's just flinging out of my hand. But anyway, I'm going to flatten this down for appearance sake. Well, now I need a way to attach this to the card. So that's where the other piece of wire is going to come into it. I am going to bend it straight up because that wire is what's going to hold it onto this card. That way it'll look like it's floating there magically. And that's why I haven't glued this card onto the actual card yet. I should say I haven't glued this paper onto the card yet. I'm going to poke a hole, or try to poke a hole, or make a mark where I think I want to have something poke the real hole. I'm going to grab something sharp, and I'm going to poke that hole. And then I'm just going to stick that wire right through there, and that's what's going to keep the wire heart onto my card. I'm going to bend that down, and I have another issue to deal with, is that heart is pretty wiggly. Well, we're going to fix that because I'm about to use a boatload of dry adhesive to get things to stick on this. In fact, I am going to use so much adhesive with this, you're going to wonder if I'm not trying to package up some small child's toy with like 800 layers of packaging. Because for some reason, I do the same thing with my glue that I do with my paint, is I just do lots. Now, I thought the adhesive would be able to hold that piece of wire down there securely for me, but I'm having some doubt there, so I'm going to bring in something more to hold it in place, and this is a piece of just tape. I'm going to really tape that thing down. I want that thing to be on there solidly, and slightly off camera still, apparently. I'm going to go around all the edges now with this ATG gun, and I am going to get all sorts of dry adhesive all over that card. Now, my secret for putting something this heavily loaded with adhesive onto a card and lining it all up is like this. I put the fold down at the bottom so that I know that that top part is lined up, because that's the important part, is that but this bottom part, I always have little bits hanging over the bottom or the sides. I can never line up all 4 sides no matter how hard I try. So my cheat is to just line up the side with the fold, because I can't cut that, and then I trim up the rest of them using scissors. Well, thanks for joining me for today's play. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up or a like. And if you'd like to see more of my videos, just hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss one of my new videos. Want some more play? Head on over to the blog at acolorfuljourney.com, where I've got a blog post that goes along with this video. And of course, click on that newsletter button and get subscribed so that you can get downloadable videos and goodies. Thanks for being a part of this colorful journey.